Hello everybody and welcome to Homestead for a Living. I want to talk about companion planting for beans, specifically pole beans and specifically companion planting things that will allow the beans to climb up it. So I'm talking less about companion planting that deters pests because honestly in this climate I've found that pole beans just don't seem to have any natural pests. They don't eat the beans. I've never seen a bug eat a bean here. Maybe that's just specific to Tennessee, but I've never had an issue, and we have bugs on just about everything else. So I love beans in general. They're very easy to grow and you don't need to companion plant anything, but you do need to trellis them if you want to take advantage of that massive vertical height. Beans will go so high and take advantage of all of that sunlight, and you'll get a tremendous amount of production from a single plant when you trellis it up properly. But trellises are expensive. They're expensive in terms of money or time or energy. It's not easy to sink poles in the ground or to do anything like that. Now there are easier methods than others. Many people will run strings down from the eaves on the south side of their house and trellis beans up them. Or in this instance, we put cattle panels for our railing on our fence, and we trellis all sorts of things ranging from our pole beans to lemon cucumbers. And we've done everything from gourd, squash, all sorts of things will climb up this, as well as our beans. But trellises aside, there's a lot of plants that have a good strong stalk that work really well as a trellis. One of my favorites is Canna Lily. Canna Lily is super easy to grow. Once you plant it, it comes back year after year, at least again in this climate. But it can really take the pressure of these beans. It doesn't seem to bow to the weight. They just grow phenomenally up it, and these giant leaves give lots of shade for the beans to grow in. We've got a little friendly spider there. But also allowing enough sun to hit the leaves. And as you can see, the stalk is really strong. It's covered in vines, but doing a phenomenal job of supporting all of those beans. Here's some more examples. And it doesn't seem to bother the canna lily at all. I still get my canna leaves, which are edible, the tubers, of course. I use them for chop and drop. You can use the leaves to wrap up food. It attracts hummingbirds and pollinators like crazy. They absolutely love the flowers. So a ton of uses. They go to seed. I save the seeds. I can sell those or plant more. So altogether, a great plant that goes really well with beans. Now, one that I can't show you right now, I did a video on it last year, is corn. Traditionally, you may have heard of this, the Three Sisters method, which is a Native American Indian method of growing, is where they would plant corn, squash, and beans, and the beans would climb the corn stalks, typically a grain corn, which has, I think, a stronger stalk, and then the squash would be the ground layer. So that's a great method. Last year I did it and it worked pretty well. The squash didn't do great, but the beans did really well, as did the corn. So corn is another really popular one. One that I have not yet tried, but I think will do really well that I'll try next year is Jerusalem artichoke. I've been growing out a big long row of Jerusalem artichoke or sunchokes. Let me get rid of this cat here real quick. He's too friendly. Jerusalem artichokes do really well. They have a strong stalk, so I suspect they'll do great in conjunction with beans, and that's another favorite plant of mine. Phenomenal staple crop that comes back year after year. And another one, and a lot of people might not like hearing this, but another plant that beans will climb up really well is ragweed. Farmers don't like ragweed. I don't hate any kind of weed because generally weeds are just breaking up compacted soil and solving problems. So here's an example of ragweed, a much despised weed, but look what's climbing up it. So this was accidental, of course, but I let this ragweed grow and it did a phenomenal job. All of these branches come out from it and offer a really good support for the bean. And all I had to do was let that weed do its thing. It's doing a phenomenal job. More canna here, Canna Lily, lots of vines trellising up it. So this is just a few to give you a few ideas, but there's indefinite numbers of plants that will do this, that have a good strong stalk that you can climb your beans up. So I'm not going to give an exhaustive list because I don't know what that exhaustive list is, but hopefully it starts people thinking. Next year I'm going to experiment with this on a larger scale. I've been doing it in patches, but beans are something we need to grow massive amounts of on my farm. We're trying to really grow our staple crops, all of our food. And so beans are an easy one, low pest pressure, easy to grow in droughts. They come back, they put nitrogen in the soil, and they're a staple crop. Unlike, lettuce or something like that you can only eat so many of. Beans, we can can them, we can dry them out with no energy needed, no canning lids, no pressure cookers, nothing like that. We can just dry them, hang them up somewhere, and then we have dried beans that we can put in chilies and beans, soups, stews, all of those things. And so they're really an important food source on our farm, so we need to grow a massive amount of them. So because it's, a trellis like this is all well and good, but it takes a lot to build that trellis. And if I want to do 50-foot, 100-foot rows and really grow vast volumes of beans, I'm gonna need something faster and easier. So I'm gonna experiment next year growing rows of useful crops like sunchokes, like Canna Lily, things that are either food for us and or products that we sell from our nursery. And then I will trellis the beans up them, as well as I'm gonna do a lot more of the corn and get used to that as well and experiment around with that. If you do wanna build the trellises, there's a million ways to do it. It is still good to have some nice sturdy trellises because you can get a huge volume of beans of that. And we've got everything from birdhouse gourds to cucumbers to lots more beans. We grow a lot of these rattlesnake beans with the pretty purple stripes, as well as blue lake pole beans. And we can trellis anything else up this. We've got some tomatoes attached on the other side. We've got a lot of squash growing over it. If you want some tips about building trellises, we got a bunch of those in our new book, Scrapsteading, and that's up at scrapsteading.com. We wrote that with Billy over at Permapastures and just talk about all sorts of tips and tricks for building things, growing things, feeding animals, everything on the cheap. Here's a few more examples of just fun stuff that we have coming up on this trellis. Cucumbers. It's really important also to trellis things like pole beans in this climate because we get so much mold, so many bugs, there's so much humidity. I'm dripping in sweat right now. Talk about humidity. And so getting food off the ground, anything that trellises, whether that's a watermelon or a bean, is really important. It really helps with production, as well as taking advantage of that vertical space and getting more sunlight on them and just getting more out of a small space, which is what we're working with here. So some food for thought. Hopefully that's useful and gets you thinking, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you've trellised beans or any other plant up a different plant, I'd love to hear some new ideas. There's a million plants out there that I'm sure this would work with. I also have done it on trees too. Less success with the trees because they're larger trees, but maybe if I had smaller trees, it would work. I did grow some up a pear tree last year, and it kind of choked out the pear tree and didn't do very well. It's come back pretty nicely. But I wouldn't advise your fruit trees trellising beans up that. So not everything will work well for it, but for a plant that matters a little less like Canna Lily and that can seemingly take the hit, I'd really recommend trying it. Just try to trellis those pole beans up anything and everything next year. In the meantime, y'all stay safe, be well, and happy homesteading.